Hey guys, what's going on? So I'm back in Australia after a massive week in Taipei for Computex 2018, as most of you guys know. If you missed some of the videos, I know there's some weird things going on with YouTube at the moment where they don't push all of the videos to your sub feed. You can just click on the channel name and you'll see all of the videos there. Overall, the experience over there was really quite good. Computex 2018 was awesome for my first time over there. It's the first time I've been there. But there were some aspects of the show which I did find somewhat underwhelming, but most of that is probably due to my fault because maybe I did set my expectations a little bit too high. But at the very least, I was just trying to sort of mentally prepare myself for what was going to be exhibited at the all the booths, so I knew what to film and what to cover. All right, so before we talk about Intel's 28-core 5 GHz presentation, I want to rewind the clock a little bit and sort of give you guys a bit of a rundown of what I was expecting going into the show. So before I flew out, there were two main things that I was expecting from Intel. The first one was their Z390 chipset or motherboards, and the second one was a new 8-core CPU for that chipset. So, at the very least, I was expecting, a new 8-core i7. That's what all the leaks were pointing the direction to. And then I was expecting, board manufacturers MSI, ASUS, ASRock, EVGA, to have their new Z390 boards on display, and that was not the case at all. In fact, neither of those two things were officially released. Instead, what happened was I and all the other media, for example, arrived to Computex 2018 with headlines of a 28-core 5 GHz CPU and an 8086K, which is a new i7 that they've released. Now, in the case of the 8086K, it's basically just a heavily binned 8700K, so they basically just cherry picked some of the best 8700Ks they can, and that runs with a single core boost clock of 5 GHz. It commemorates one of their old processors, the 8086, and you can pick it up for around $425 on Amazon. So for roughly $80 more than your 8700K, there's nothing really special about this CPU, other than, it is being cherry picked from, a large sample. The only sort of market I see this 8086K attracting are serious overclockers who, want a heavily binned chip and want to take it up to 5.3 or 5.4 gigahertz to maybe break some records. So back to those headlines then. Intel releases new 28-core 5 gigahertz CPU as demonstrated in their keynote presentation.
Without further ado, I would like to present to you a new 28-core processor. Woo! Come on.
And nothing against the media who published these headlines or anything like that, as they didn't know the blatant lies that were being displayed in front of them. But I mean, come on, obviously something is going on here.
Not only is it just 28-core beast, it's incredibly high performing, both single-threaded and multi-threaded.
So we have two systems here. We have Gigabyte and ASUS, both with this brand new single socket.
Brand new single socket. So sort of, it is true that the CPU was being used on a single socket board, although it was one with a 32-phase VRM with 4 8-pin CPU power headers. But the CPU was by no means a new one. Actually, it was later discovered that the CPU being used on the display was a Xeon 8176, which is a Skylake CPU that was released in Q3 of 2017. And the best part is you can get your hands on this CPU for $10,000 US. By far the most disturbing spectacle of this performance, however, and yes, that's what we're calling it now, it's a performance, it's no longer a presentation, was how they got this thing up to 5 gigahertz. Here is a look at the board and cooler setup courtesy of the Tom's Hardware article, which I'll link down below. But that, my friends, is a 1000 watt chiller used to cool the CPU to sub-ambient temperatures just to get the thing stable at that frequency. Apparently this thing operates at like 50 dBA as well, so there's that, and you can actually see this thing in the system on display and how they have mounted the hoses going inside their build, and man, this thing is just a complete mess. So after Intel got found out and all of the details went sort of published and viral, Intel said that they forgot about the details of their test system. All right, so firstly, you can't forget that it's an old processor if you explicitly say that it's a new CPU.
A new 28-core processor.
both with this brand new single socket 28 core.
And secondly, you are completely aware of the stunt that you are pulling in front of us consumers and your investors. This is in complete contrast to AMD, who actually demonstrated successfully the performance and scalability of their Zen architecture. They did this with the announcement of their new Threadripper 2 CPUs, and the one that they actually demoed was a 32 core part, which makes use of the full 8 core die, 4 of them on the PCB, and that one should hit the market around Q3 this year. Now, they said that they actually used retail boards for this CPU, and that they did it with air cooling as well. So that's pretty impressive. So let's take a step back and look at this from a broader perspective. So on the AMD side, you've got a real CPU used on a real motherboard, and you've got a real demo. On the Intel side, you've got an 8086K, which no one asked for. We didn't even get the whatever it was, the 8-core CPU that was meant to be announced with Z390. And instead we get some BS demo used with an old Xeon server chip, which costs about 10 grand. This is laughable at best, but more it's just disappointing because Intel didn't need to do this. And that's because Intel make decent CPUs and they didn't need to go and mess this one up. The Core i3-8100, for example, is pretty much the best performance per dollar CPU in that price bracket. You can check that one out up there. And then the i5-8400 is another great mainstream CPU with gaming performance on par with an 8700K. Again, I did a review on that. You can check that out up there. So their multi-threading performance, however, it's not on par with Ryzen. We know that. The 8400 can't compete on a multi-threading level with the 2600, and either can the 8700K with the 2700 or 2700X. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't bother competing in that sort of aspect for multi-threading, but of course they shouldn't try and fake some new CPU in front of us all. Now, what will be interesting is that Intel said that we can expect this 28 core part, whether it's going to be 5 gigahertz or not, we don't know, but they said we should expect it in Q4 of this year. My question is how? Because the current flagship that isn't a Xeon server chip is the i9-7980XE. This is an 18-core processor that boosts to 4.4 gigahertz out of the box and has an overclocking ceiling of about 4.8 gigahertz. Now, with that boost clock, it's pulling 500 watts alone out of the box in AVX workloads. So if Intel actually plan on releasing a 28-core part for us to use that boosts to 5 gigahertz or maybe overclocks to 5 gigahertz, being generous, it has to be a lot more power efficient than what's on the table, unless they're expecting us to use the same 1000 watt chiller that they're using in their demo. And it's clear that Intel have pulled this stunt to steal a lot of the hype and headlines around AMD's Threadripper announcement, but they really have shot themselves in the foot here. Their stock price has already dropped by a few percent, and to say that gamers, enthusiasts, and the media feel a little bit cheated right now is a bit of an understatement. And all they've really done here is given AMD a ton of ammunition in fulfilling their marketing strategy as being, an honest and generous company. And on that note, it's really awesome to see AMD demonstrate the scalability of the Zen or Zen Plus architecture. Of course, when we first saw the Threadripper die layout, we knew that we would eventually get that 32 core part, and here we are. So when we first saw it, we saw the Ryzen dies sort of glued, as Intel would say, but as AMD would say, tied together with their Infinity Fabric. We knew we would be getting the 8 cores on each die, equating to 32 cores. But one thing I'm really looking forward to is seeing how these new AMD CPUs perform on existing X399 boards and the new refreshed X399 board that will be released alongside with them, and also how they perform across different styles of coolers. So you guys know what to do. Let me know what you think of this mess down in the comment section below. Personally, I feel that although it is, a bit of a laugh and it is cringy, it is quite serious because, this was a large section of their keynote where they're pitching to both, consumers, large consumers, and of course investors as well. As always, guys, a huge thanks for watching. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.